5 scores! Rick Bott.
We decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick 5, Gary Neville.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 59 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, another former ECHLer, joins us today. I'm beginning to think you weren't a badass coach because another guy didn't hesitate to join us. You must have been a softie.
I'll tell you what I was, Mike. I was very, very good at communicating with my players. I treated them extremely well, but there was times where you had to put the hammer down, and you do so. But I like to think that my players enjoyed playing for me and enjoyed the way I coach.
Well, stop setting it up.
We'll find out.
Let's get him to tell us, okay? We want the other side of this story. So, Squid, our guest today, you know very well, as we've just found out. He backstopped your ECHL South Carolina Stingrays to a 1997 Kelly Cup, along with picking out the playoff MVP to boot. Originally drafted Vancouver in 1991, enjoyed a 6-year pro career, coached 5 seasons South Carolina. Today, pro scout for the Washington Capitals. Welcome to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show, Jason Fitzsimmons. Fitzy, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure here. Good to see your faces, and heard nothing but great things about this podcast. So I'm excited to be on it.
Great. Well, listen, now, before we get started, Jace, I want you to tell me the truth. Squid keeps telling me what a good and fair coach he was. Between us only, how was he really?
Well, you say between you only because we're probably the only 3 on this podcast anyway, so I don't.
That's right.
But you know what? I've said it to 2 other coaches. I've said the 3 best coaches in my life were my dad. I said Lauren Mulliken and Rick Five were the 3 best coaches that I ever had. And Jack McElhargy is a very close 4th, even though he didn't play me. But Rick was a fair coach. He got the most out of his players, and he was the type of guy that if we were playing 3-3 with travel every night, you went through the other end of the rink just out of fear of you didn't want to embarrass your coach because he got the most out of us, which, ultimately in the 1 year in 97, we ended up winning a championship. And,
yep.
You can say players all you want, but you play for the guy that cracks the whip behind the bench, and Rick did a really great job of doing that.
Well, we want to get into your scouting career in a bit, but one question I'd like to ask is, just like everybody else, the last 18 months have been pretty challenging for everybody. How did you get through it, especially trying to do the job you do today?
Yeah, it was different. It was difficult. I've been with the Capitals now for 14, 15 years as a scout. Before that, with an affiliate. So, long story short, it was different. With a lot of video, not so much traveling. Obviously, the conflict with the pandemic and where you could go and couldn't go made it very challenging. I think it was hard on everybody, not only just the hockey world, obviously, but life in general. And everything's about making adjustments. And you get dealt this hand, and you got to play it. And fortunately enough, I'm playing cards with a pretty good organization, a very good organization in Washington that started at the top with Brian McClellan, and he let us go out and do what we felt comfortable with. And there was challenges. There's a lot of video. We've never done this much amount of video. And, I guess time will tell, if we made the right decisions. But here we are. Things are starting to get back to normal, I think, and hopefully pick up where we left off, Mike.
Squid?
Fitzy, when you're out scouting, what are the biggest things you're looking for in a player? I mean, is it – because, I hear a lot about today, everybody's looking for speed and skill, and size doesn't matter anymore, which I totally disagree with, because if you have the speed and skill, but you're 6'4" instead of 5'9", I think you got a little bit of an advantage. But what exactly do you look for when now I know you're not looking at the amateur guys, you're looking at the pro guys for possible trades and that sort of thing. So are you looking at anything in specific?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Rick, because a lot of people say to you, like, what catches your eye? And, you kind of have this template. You want a smart hockey player, you want players with skill, and you kind of go down the line. But for me personally, and every scout's probably a little bit different, but I want guys that compete. I want guys that are going to go hard every night and they're going to catch my eye. And it doesn't matter if it's, your fourth game in 5 nights and you traveled all. Those are the guys that I right away come out to me. They jump out of the page. Like, this guy just played in Bridgeport Friday, Saturday, and he's driven all the way up to Syracuse. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's not going to be a really good hockey game up there. But me selfishly or personally, I'm like, no, I want to see how that guy competes on a Sunday. To me, that
Yep.
defines the character of a guy. We talk and we hear so much in today's NHL, hockey in general, business in general. We need culture. Well, culture starts with high character people. You get the high character people involved and get them in the right mix, and you can teach them different skill sets and skating, and we got every type of coach we need nowadays. But yeah, for the long and short of it, Rick, is just the character and the high compete level catches my eye. Then I go back and check on his skating and his shooting, his physicality and hockey sense. But that one jumps out at me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I remember in South Carolina, that was my biggest thing. Was I wanted character individuals. I wanted guys who were going to compete, and we had that. I mean, to a man, I don't think we had anybody on our team that didn't compete night in and night out, and I think that's why we won a championship.
Well, to your point, Rick, you go back to that year, and I've had the fortune of being parts of teams here since then, and those character guys they're gonna jump on you if you aren't competing. If you're a so-called skilled guy that isn't pulling your weight, you're gonna get jumped on, and then that locker room is a real tight-knit community, and you play for the guy next to you. And you made some big trades that year and brought in guys like, Chris Rowland is one that stands out in my mind. I'm going to give you a quick example of exactly what you said. He was a high character guy, very limited, could fight, didn't skate very well, played a specific role. We just lost game 4 in Pensacola, had to fly the next day down back to Charleston for the decisive game 5. And I was complaining. I was like, this is BS. We just played here. We got to drive back 7 hours and play tomorrow afternoon. And I consider myself a very high character guy, but I was complaining about stuff that was out of my control and had nothing to do with it. Well, he grabbed me and pushed me aside and called me out in front of everybody and said, it's the same for that team on the other side of the rink. You get your head screwed on straight, we're going to go back there and win that game. And sure enough, he put me in my spot, but that's that character guy that did that. And I was wrong. I was like totally wrong. I'm like, Chris, you're right. Let's go back. And we went back and won it. But those are what those guys do. They aren't always going to score the overtime winner. Yeah. They aren't always going to be the heroes in the front page of the Toronto Sun. But they're the guys that are going to be keeping the room together as glue. And you need them. You can't have 12 skilled guys, and you've got to have specific role players. I thought you did a really good job of putting guys in their role and having to play up to it.
Well, you know what, Jace, I want to get into a couple. We're going to get into that a little deeper when we get into your playing career. But just the last question before we start touching on that, just an overall generalized view about scouting and what's gone on in the last 18 months. With all that period of everything going as it has with the pandemic thing, would you agree that there's going to be some surprises emerge, not only from the junior level, but maybe some of the pros, with players flying under the radar, if you will, because maybe scouts haven't had a chance to really get a good look at these guys. So there could be some surprises, and you guys are going to have to be on your toes.
Yeah. I don't doubt there will be, because you don't have the eyes on there that we've had in years past. And I kind of like it. It kind of makes our job even that much more important, because, there's going to be guys that, scouts haven't had laid eyes on in the last year. I mean, a little bit of video and a little big difference. Video, live, night and day. There's night and day being there and actually seeing a guy, seeing his body language on the bench. Cameras don't pick that up, So to answer your question, there's going to be some guys. It's going to be interesting. And you know what? If I am one of those guys that slid under the radar, this is a great opportunity to kind of prove your true colors and go out there do what made you famous. So I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Fantastic. Well, let's start with you and your early days. And first off, were you always a goalie? And if you were, how'd you end up in the barrel?
Yeah, I was fascinated at a young age of just the goalie equipment, and I always wanted to play goal. I remember the first day when I was 5 years old, I got put into that position, and it kind of morphed into like, you aren't leaving because you're okay at this. So I remember, like, not to back you up too far, but I remember being at a Pee Wee tournament in Belgony, Saskatchewan, and we had a big tournament, and one of the mums came up to me and she got down on one knee and she said, "Now, Jason, you're playing goal tonight, and you aren't arguing that." And I like, okay, I'm the goalie, you know. And we went out and whatever. I don't remember if we won or lost, but it's just, the small town craziness of hockey in Canada, where it's just important to the parents to win as the kids. But I just stayed in the position. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the challenge, and as we moved up the ladders, you didn't think you knew you were an okay goalie, and then about 15, 16, you hear rumblings, and this is pre-Twitter, all the media, computers, all that, but you hear rumblings, people are watching you, so you're like, I might be okay at this. So we got drafted by Vancouver and signed an entry-level deal, and that's where Rick and I met for the first time, and Rick was winding down his playing career, and Vancouver had signed him on as in a mentorship role for us young guys, and it was huge for us. He taught us what it was like to be a pro. We're coming in from junior hockey in Moose Jaw and Regina and Duluth and North Dakota, and we don't know any better. You need that leadership group. So that's where Rick and I end up, hooking up for the first couple of years, and then he became an assistant coach with Jack McElhargy, and I ended up trusting him. And it's just like anything in life, somebody's giving you advice and they've been right, you're gonna automatically trust in them. So when Rick left Vancouver's organization and went down to Charleston in South Carolina, they were the affiliate of the Vancouver Canucks in the ECHL, and I was winding down that entry level deal, and I was out of Vancouver's plans. So Rick got me down there, and that was, I believe, 93, 94, maybe 94, 95.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. Just come down to a hockey market where people didn't know hockey. But once again, you go into trust in Rick. He said, you're going to love it down here. You're going to come down here. And it was all of that. And here I am, 30 years later, pretty well, and still living here. And it's good. I was talking to my wife, Chantel, and she's from Saskatchewan as well. She's been with me this whole journey. And, there's people you meet along the line that kind of mold your career. And outside of my family and teammates, there's 5 people, and Rick was one of them. We're really where I am today, and 15 years in the NHL with Washington, and, part of a Stanley Cup winner. I owe a lot to Rick and just for guidance and that mentorship. And, I'm grateful for it from here on in.
Well, Jace, I want you to go back and talk about the WHL and just talk about, as a kid playing in that league, how good it is, how tough it is, particularly the travel. And I'll tell you where I'm going with this. And Squid hates this. We've touched on this many times on the podcast with Western hockey players. But during the period of the 80s, and as I said, he's going to hate this. He's smiling already. There was more of a leaning towards Western Canadian kids because of the grueling travel, the weather conditions, versus the OHL, where these kids slept in their own bed basically every night, and they weren't used to that. So the toughness and being aware and all that kind of stuff, they were growing up much quicker. So would you agree, and again, now coming from your scouting side also, that as a tiebreaker, that may fit into the equation when they were looking at these kids, Western versus Eastern? And just maybe talk about what you went through.
Yeah, it was I was proud. When I grew up, I wanted to play in the Western Hockey League. It was the Regina Pats of the Moose Jaw Warriors. So growing up on a farm outside of Regina, like, all you thought about was playing in the Western Hockey League. When I became eligible to play there, I went there and tried out and didn't make the team. They had players in place. I got sent down to Wilcox, Notre Dame in Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and Barry McKenzie, who brilliant hockey guy, kind of took me under his wing and said, listen, we're going to make you a better hockey player. So I said, I don't care, Barry. I just want to play in the Western Hockey League, whatever you got to do. So I was down there for 2 months, and we lost 14-1 in Flin Flon one night. And I gave up 7 goals and got pulled. Named the third star. I'm just kidding about that. But we were busing home, and I remember it was a Christmas night, and there's a long bus from Flin Flon to Notre Dame, and Barry McKenzie called me to the front of the bus, and he said, Lauren Mulliken just called. He wants you to go up to Moose Jaw right after Christmas. And I said, okay, great. I'll pack up. I'll leave tonight when we get home at 4 a.m. And Barry said, no. He said, I've got 6 opportunities where you're going to get a full ride into Division I college here. And he started naming the schools. And I said, okay, I have no interest in that. I want to play junior hockey in Moose Jaw. So we went to Moose Jaw. I got in the car, drove to Moose Jaw, and it was a great experience. And it's a tough league. You grow up quick. You're 16, 17 playing against 20-year-olds. And, there's a lot of stuff that probably went on back then that can't go on now, from the shaving of your heads to kind of making you become part of the team. And that was all part of the game back then. And no one ever kicked up a big stink about that. And it was just a great experience. And then when Vancouver selected me, and then I moved on from there, I've got nothing but unbelievable things to say about how Moose Jaw ran. It was a small town that people loved. People loved coming to games. That was what to do in the town on a game night, and they treated me really well. So it was a good experience. You hear all the stories of like the fights, and those are true. I mean, you look on, I think that hockey card that you just showed there, my 20-year-old year, I had 8 assists and 99 penalty minutes. To have 99 penalty minutes as a goaltender, that's a very dubious honor. That's one of my proudest things. Like, we fought some tough guys, like the Brent Myers and the Kerry Toporowskis of the world, and it was a brawl. And I think I ended up playing like almost 60 games that year. Mike Babcock was actually our coach that year, and I didn't know it till the end of the year, but because we didn't have the computer access. But Ron Hextall had the goaltender leading penalty minute record at 114 minutes with Brandon one year. And I didn't know that. Had I known that,
15 minutes, you'd have broken.
I would have taken a 5 and a 10 and, yes, I got out of there. But, it's a tough league, but it prepared you. So, in the OHL, like we have the stigma too, like where, the OHLers, they like to get their points and score their goals, and the Quebec Leaguers, it's all about points. But in all honesty, the CHL is an incredible league. And, since moving on, I've got into coaching and managing ECHL teams and working with the Caps. But I still tell people now, looking back, like, you really can't make a wrong decision. But if you've got the chance to go on and get a college degree and better yourself as a person from an educational standpoint, that's the route I would push. And nothing negative towards the CHL, but, just knowledge in school is just so important nowadays.
Squid?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when Justin got drafted by Sudbury in the OHL, and we went up there. Mike Foligno was the coach at the time, and I played with Mike and everything. And then we got home a couple of days later, and he said to me, I said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I'm going to help you do what you want to do. And he said, well, Dad, he says, I'm a good player, but I'm not a star. He says, and as a 16-year-old, I might not play that much. He said, but if I go to the U.S. program, there's probably a pretty good chance I'm going to get a college scholarship in the U.S. and I'm going to become a better player. I'm going to get more ice time. I'm going to get good off ice. And sure enough, he goes there, has 2 great years traveling around the world, enjoying the game, living with a great family in Ann Arbor. And then off he goes to Miami, Ohio on a full ride for 4 years. And I said, good for you. I said, you couldn't have done it any better. And, I really believe, like you, Jason, if you get that opportunity, mean, if you're a superstar like a Connor McDavid or someone like that, you go play junior, because you're going to play in the National Hockey League. But if you're in the middle of the pack, go get your education. You can still make the NHL. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah,
Jace,
nobody's going to take that. Nobody can take that degree away from you, and that you can always go back on that. And if you're a good hockey player, you're going to get found. And especially nowadays with all the social media outlets, like you're going to get found.
I was going to say to you, Jace, we're still talking about Western Hockey League. Just again, it amazes me how these guys got through all that as these young kids. Like some of the crazy things maybe happen on some of your trips, like bus breakdowns, running out of fuel, no heat sometimes on the bus. Did that ever happen on any of your trips?
Oh, bus breakdowns were a staple. I think sometimes
Exactly.
it happened, and just to see how guys would react, and yeah, that was part of it, and that's something I'd never change. And that happened in pro hockey too a couple times, and it's the things that happen on the bus, from the card games to the conversations with your teammates, and those are the best times of your life. You establish like friendships and bonds, and those are the guys that you're going to battle with in Spokane on a Saturday night, where I think that really helps mold you as a young person, and you take those lessons and you take them into life after, where almost no problem's a big deal after that, and I wouldn't change it for a thing. We talk about going to college and all that sort of thing, but I mean, you look back here, I'm 50 years old now, and I wouldn't change the way this whole thing has gone. I've been fortunate enough to have my family beside me. I met my wife in grade 8 art. And Rick knows her well, and she's a hockey wife. My son was born into the game, and I wouldn't change a thing if I could. I really wouldn't.
Fantastic.
Made some mistakes along, but it's been fabulous.
But your son's going in a different direction. He's going the baseball route.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
So
he's a ball player. And when Rick got us down here into the South, and just quick before I go back to the baseball portion of it, when I took this job with Washington in 2007, George McPhee said to me, he said, Jace, he said, you can move anywhere in the country. We'll move you wherever you want to be. Like Charleston, you got Charlotte there, you got Raleigh. You don't have a lot of NHL cities. We'll put you wherever you want. And I said, George, I've been down here for a long time. I've got my roots down here. We've got so many friends. We're embedded in the community. I said, I'd like to give it a year and see how it goes. Travel's going to be hard, and there's a lot of road trips. But that was, like I said, 14, 15 years ago, and I'm still here. And, in the South, it's a little different. It's baseball, football on a Friday night is like, it's like the WHL and the OHL. Like, it's a big deal down here. So my son got into baseball, and he's turned into a heck of an athlete. And, whatever happens from there, I don't care. I like going to the park. I like getting a little break from hockey. I think nowadays kids are around it too much. And, it's nice to go to the ballpark and eat some sunflower seeds and kick back to the wood bat. So if he goes baseball, great. I'm going to push the college route for him. But for now, we're just taking it kind of day by day, year by year, and see what happens.
How old is he?
He's 15. He's 15, and he's a good mix of my wife and myself. I took him golfing today, and this is the first time we played golf together. He's just up late in his career, but just the time you can spend with him, because 15 turns into 25, like you guys probably know. And next thing you know, it's your empty nesters and away you go. So you got to enjoy the time you have. And I've been a big believer, Mike, with my whole life. Like Rick would probably tell that. Like I live every day to the fullest, and not too often I have a bad day, and they're very few and far between.
Well, now let's go back to your draft here.
I can honestly, Mike, I can tell you from my experience, what he just said is absolutely true. He could let in, well, he didn't let 4 or 5 in very many nights, but if he did, the next day he'd come to the rink with a smile on his face and ready to go, and just like but you know what? Most of the guys on our team were like that. right, Jason? I mean, we had such a great character team that these guys, they just didn't seem to let those things bother them. And I remember when Jason came down, you weren't allowed to give two-year contracts, okay? But his Chantel was going to dental hygienist school or whatever, and it was a 2-year program. So I told him, I said, okay, I'll give you 2 years. And he said, well, you can't sign me for 2 years. I said, no, but I'll promise you 2 years. Well, after the first year, he won the championship and the MVP, and then he had to have back surgery. Couldn't play. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, you just become another assistant coach with me, and we'll pay you whatever we were going to pay you. And it all worked out. Then the next thing you know, I leave. Rick Aduno takes over. He becomes the main assistant. And then the next thing you know, he's the head coach. And Jared Bednar is his assistant. it was like a thing that just kept going in Charleston.
Well, it was all because of you, Squid. It was all because of you.
Well, I think everything had to do with me because I started it all off. Yeah. But look where he is now, and look where Bednar is now, and I mean, I loved it down there, and I wanted to stay there, but you know what? Didn't happen.
But Jace, I want to go back and talk about your 91 year draft. Now, of course, there's no internet, as we know, and all that. Any kind of talk leading into the draft, what may happen to you? And if you didn't get drafted, what were you going to do? Was there a contingency plan?
So funny story, Mike. I was 91, no internet. Our Moose Jaw Warrior team had a slow pitch tournament, and we were playing a slow pitch tournament. Vancouver called me that morning, and they interviewed me, just kind of, hey, you know, it's generic questions, you know, how's your fitness? What do you think? You know, and where you go? So that was that. So we go to this 24-hour slow pitch tournament. Your first game could be 2 a.m. on a Friday night. You might play again at 5:30, you know, or Saturday morning, I guess. And it's one of those.
Yeah.
So it's the whole town shuts down for that. And we put a Moose Jaw Warrior team in. So it's draft day. I'm sitting around in one of the billets' house, and we're watching. And Eric Lindros gets picked by Quebec. He doesn't put the jersey on. We watch the first round. Well, we got to go play baseball. So day goes on. We're having fun and having a few, you know, adult beverages, and the day's getting away on us. And I see a guy named Travis Thiessen. And I say, Travis, any word on the draft? He said, yeah, Pittsburgh picked me. And, well, let's go down to the beer gardens and celebrate. And I said, did you hear anything about me? And he said, no, I haven't heard it. I know they just finished up the draft. I said, okay, so whatever. So I go in, I figure I better check in at the farm. So I put a quarter in the payphone, which I had to borrow from someone because I didn't have a quarter. And I called my dad at the farm, and I said, hey, Dad, any word on the draft? And my dad was a very stoic farmer, all business. And you could hear emotion in his voice. He said, he goes, yes, Jace, I just hung up with Pat Quinn, and Vancouver selected you. And I said, well, Dad, what round did I go in? He goes, you know what? I don't even remember what he said. I was so proud. So I knew I got picked by Vancouver, and I didn't know what round. So I'm like, you got to figure out. So I bored another quarter, called CHAB Radio in Moose Jaw, got connected to the sports section. And I said, hey, it's Jason Fitzsimmons from the Moose Jaw Warriors. Can you tell me what round I got drafted in? You know, and he said, yeah, you went in the 11th round by Vancouver. And I'm like, oh, thanks. But nowadays, it's all on your internet.
Yeah.
You get Twitter, and away you go. It was a different era back then. And so it was a fun night. And there was a few of us that got drafted from Moose Jaw that day. And that's a day that I won't forget. And I've told that story a bunch of times.
Fantastic. It's great. Okay, well, I was going to say, well, take us through your first pro camp, and what were your expectations going in?
Just try and stop the puck. I remember it was in Victoria. Vancouver would always have their training camp in Victoria. So we'd meet at the Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver, and we'd do our physicals and our Wingate bikes and, you know, body fat, and then we'd all hop on a bus and we'd take the ferry across and we'd go to Victoria. And I remember being nervous and sitting there and watching all the veterans get on their buses, and like Kirk McLean had his golf clubs, and Cliff Ronning had his fishing rods, and everyone's loading up the bus, and we're going over to Victoria. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool, So we get on the ice the next day, and I get put into the scrimmage. We used to scrimmage a lot. I got put into the scrimmage, and the first shot was Trevor Linden coming down the wing and just goes bar down on me. My very first shot in the NHL count. And I was like, oh my God, this isn't a great start. And Stan Smeal was kind of officiating the game, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Kid, he's done that to a few kids. Don't worry about it." And so that was my first start to Vancouver's camp, and I remember, it was just amazing to be around those guys and see how hard they work and their off ice commitment, and and just caveat on that story. So my rookie year, Mike, we got sent down to Hamilton, and we had Troy Gamble and Bob Mason were the goalies. So I'm a young kid that didn't have a lot of room. So Jack Mack said, "We're going to send you down to Columbus, Ohio, and that's our ECHL affiliate. We want you to get into a couple games and kind of fine tune your game." Rewind that. The year before, I went up to Vancouver and was the third goalie in the playoffs for 6 weeks. So I kind of thought, I'm going to probably have a good chance of making this team somewhere down the line. So anyway, I go down to Columbus. First, Terry Ruskowski's our coach. First game is in Erie, Pennsylvania. We lose the game 9-3. I get lit up for 9 goals. And I'm thinking like, I'm going in there shutting the door here. Like, nothing's getting by me tonight. I give up 9. So we hop on the bus. We get about 15 miles outside of the town. Bus pulls over, and I've been quiet. Like, we just gave up 9 goals. Like, I'm being quiet. I'm not saying a word. Bus pulls over, hits the air brakes. I go, "What's going on?" A couple of veterans walk by the bus. They go, "We got to get our beer. We got to go all the way to Roanoke here." I go, what do you mean get our beer? We're playing tomorrow night. "Yeah, you can only have a 6-pack. So the vets get off and get a 6-pack. I'm just sitting there. We get to Roanoke about 4 in the morning. Terry Ruskowski says to me, "Hey, you had a rough one tonight, kid. But you're going tonight in Roanoke. I want you going again." So we win the next night, but we win 9-8. So now I've given up a 9 spot and an 8 spot. I'm 1-1 with an 8.5 goals against. So it was definitely an eye opener into pro hockey, and but that's from there it got a lot better, and made my way back up to Hamilton, and the rest is history, I guess.
Hey, I got a question for you on the Taft Coliseum in Columbus. I was there a few years ago. Is that not the highest roof you've ever seen in a hockey rink, or is that my imagination?
Well, we played at the fairgrounds when I was in Columbus.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I mean, the only time I looked up to the heavens is when I needed a big save. So usually my eyes were closed at that. But I don't. I just remember the fans were really crazy. They loved their hockey, and we'd jam 5,500 fans in there every night, and it was like a little mini NHL environment.
Yeah, awesome place. Squid?
Hey, Jason, would you say that your busiest time of the year is probably leading up to the trade deadline, going around to look at, prospects, players on other teams, getting ready for the GM perhaps to pull off some trades before the trade deadline to put your team over the hump, or would it be in the off season, or?
Well, it doesn't quit now. Like, even on a typical day like today, I'm trying to get ready, and here we are, August 10th or 11th or whatever it is today, and I've been on the phone nonstop. And you're dealing with agents, you're dealing with your players, and rookie camp coming up. So it never stops. But getting back to your point on the trade deadline, that's a very, very important time. Maybe not our busiest, because the trade deadline typically on a normal calendar year falls the end of February, and Brian McClellan brings us in at the start of February, and we've identified kind of what our needs are throughout the year, where our deficiencies are, and what we got to get better in. So we'll have guys that we've targeted. We meet as a group, as a pro staff, and then we go out and we have more specific assignments. Some games you're just going to Buffalo to watch upcoming free agents, but as we get down to the deadline, you're zeroing in on, like, okay, hey, they might be moving a Sam Reinhart type player. Like, let's go in there and get good reads on them. Sometimes you send 2 guys in at a time, and just so you're working it together. And I like that. That's fun, because you go back to the year when we won it in 2018. We identified our needs, and we went out and got them. And you just know if you make the right move, it can be something special. And as a staff in Washington, it's a great group to work for, from the ownership down. I'm not just saying that; it's because I know that. Like, we're a big family, and culture starts in the office, and we want to go to battle for one another, and we work together. Nobody ever gets credit for claiming that guy or signing that guy. We're a team, and that's one of the things I'm really proud about in working with Washington, is that there's no individuals. So trade deadline is fun, because if we get the right guy, that year it was more of a subtle move. We would try to get some depth defense, and we ended up getting Michael Kempney out of Chicago, and he ended up playing a very, very intricate role in us winning that year in 2018.
Well, I was going to say, Jace, why don't you?
By the way, Mike, before you go any further, I am the honorary scout for Washington, because when Fitzy needs any information on anybody here in Toronto or the area, he calls me, and I give him the scoop.
That's true.
I was going to say, why don't you?
Well, who did we talk about? One player in particular who is now playing in Ottawa.
Well, I remember having specific conversations about Zach Hyman with you, and
Connor Brown,
and Connor Brown, so I guess I shouldn't be indulging my secrets, but a lot of the things we do is gathering information.
Sure, absolutely.
We know what they can do as a hockey player. Like, we've had eyes on them for a long time in a lot of games, our scouting staff. But you like to find out what's he like off the ice, what's he like away from the rink. To quote Draft Day, did they show up at his birthday party type thing? It's like absolutely.
We
want to know all this stuff, because if you're going to try and build a team with the right culture, you got to be bringing the right people in. But so you'll talk to anything from trainers that you had along the way, to coaches, to friends, people that keep their ear to the ground. We know what they are as players, but we're trying to dig deeper. And it goes down to the old cliche, don't burn a bridge.
Well, I got a question for you. Both you guys can answer on the coaching side. Now, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how you got into the coaching and some of the challenges you met from being an assistant to going to a head coach. But if you can keep all this together, Jason, and go through it all, one of the most challenging aspects would have to be telling a player he's been cut, it's over, he's not good enough, or he's been traded. There's no manual to teach you how to do that. It's happened to all of us. It happens in everyday life for anybody. So where I'm coming from on this one, and this is for both you guys, and your experience on both sides, was it harder to accept the bad news as a player getting told to you, or giving it to a player as a coach? Jace?
Well, that's a great question. I've never really thought of that, because I was really a big optimist my whole life, as Rick and I kind of touched on. And I always try to, glasses, we'll fill the glass back up if it's half empty here. So for me, I think it was a player, as a coach, giving news. Like, you bring a guy in and you got to deliver bad news to him. And, the one thing my dad taught me is say your piece, get it out, and just be quiet. Sometimes you get into coaches that deliver you the bad news, and they just ramble on and talk in circles. Give me the bad news, give him the bad news, look him in the eye, thank him, shake his hand, and move on. And we use this cliche today talking to a player, but hockey is the best game in the world. There's hands down. It can be a mean business sometimes, and it is a business, and it's it's the same thing now with dealing with players and contracts, and Brian McClellan has given me a little bit of leeway with talking with agents, and you just got to be honest and be transparent, and they're going to probably hate you, but I think they'll respect you in the long run, and that's just something I try to do as a coach.
Yeah, I would agree with Jason on that. I mean, well, first of all, I never really got that much bad news when I played, because I was on a one-way contract. They weren't going to send me down and pay me that kind of money in the minors. But I did get traded several times when, it was not an opportune time to be traded, like the day after Christmas and that sort of thing. But I found telling a young man like 20, 21 years old that I got to let him go. I mean, that was tough. But like Jason said, you got to be honest with the individual, and you just got to let them know that, you care about them, but unfortunately you don't have room for them. And, if you do, then I think they're going to gain a lot of respect for you. And I had Bunny LaRock, who I played with, and loved Bunny, and we were, best friends. And I had his son there, and I had to let his son go, and that was very difficult for me, But like Jason said, it's a business, and the business is winning. And putting together a winning team. And sometimes you got to make tough decisions, and they're not always popular, but you got to do it. And unfortunately, that I think that's the most difficult thing that you have to do as a coach.
Well, there's a human side to it as well. And just so you guys know, I made a footnote to myself that I would think it's tougher to deliver the news, because being told bad news, whether you're traded or any of those things I mentioned, you can do something about it. You can train harder, you can play harder, you can fight more, you can do whatever you need to do to try and improve your game and maybe get another shot. You have no control over what the other player receiving the news thinks or how he takes it. He may just say, screw it, and walk away and quit, when all he had to do was one of the above and maybe get another shot. So that would weigh on me as a coach. If I was given that news and this guy just walked away and all he had to do was work a little harder, that'd be very tough.
Yeah. When I was managing the team in South Carolina, I had to do it with our leading scorer of all time, and it was the hardest thing. We were out West Coast playing in California, and we went 5-1 in 6 games, flew home all day, and I ended up making the trade in the Atlanta airport, and I had to tell him that night when we got home at 1 a.m, and it was hard. We played together. We won a championship when we were teammates together, but at the end of the day, it was the right move for the team. And, we didn't talk for probably 5 years after that, but it's hard. It's hard. And you're doing, of course, it's not personal. You're doing what you think you have to do. And that was the toughest move I made as a coach to this day. And I had to do it, and I don't regret doing it, but it was difficult.
Squid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no question. I had to make some tough. The year we won the championship, Scott Boston, probably one of our most popular players, and obviously a great defenseman, offensive defenseman. But we needed a guy like Chris Rowland in order to win the championship, and I knew that in my heart that we needed him more than we needed Scott Boston. And I got this kid from Raleigh that. Kirk Kleinendorf did not want, and what's his name? Fitzy, help me out here.
Mark, hey,
Mark. No, the little defenseman.
Oh, Brad Dexter.
No, Brad Dexter. That's it. And I got him for basically nothing, and he turned out to be probably as good offensively or better than Scott Boston was.
Yeah.
So I pulled him in, made the trade, got Rowland into the mix, and off we went. And in the finals, I remember we won 4-1. They took a ton of penalties. I think our power play was running at about 35% in that series, and Brad Dexter was the guy who quarterbacked that power play.
Yeah.
So it all worked out, and it wasn't easy.
Mike, can I tell you a funny story about that?
Absolutely. I want to hear it.
This is one of my all-time favorite funny stories about that year. Is we're playing Doug Shedden in Louisiana, and I was having a good run in the playoffs, and so after we got up 2-1 in Louisiana, and look at those pads. Don't move that picture there. I was wearing those pads right there, and they were pads that I had from the previous year that were worn down. And so after game 3, Rick comes into the office and he says, "Hey, Fitz, the supervisor official, who I'm going to remain anonymous here. I won't bring his name into this. He wants to measure your pads." come into my office. So I walk into my office. I got half my equipment off. I still got my goal pads and bottom half on. And the league official says, hey, Jason, my name is so-and-so. I'm here to measure your pads. And they were broken down and wore down. I'd worn them for a year and a half. I liked old equipment. And at the time, pads had to be 13 3/4. So he goes down and he measures them, and they come to 14.5. So they're 3/4 of an inch too big. So I said, okay, wow. He goes, well, here's what I'm going to do. He goes, I'm going to leave this office in 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, I'm going to go get Doug Shedden from Louisiana. I'm going to come back and knock on this door. I'm going to act like I was never in here, and we're going to measure your pads in front of Doug Shedden. He looks at Rick, and he looks at Rick Aduno, and he goes, you got 5 minutes to do whatever makes these things legal. And he goes, I'm measuring your right pad. I'm measuring your right pad when I come back in this office. So he closes the door. Our eyes look at each other like saucers. So I lay down on my side with my right pad out, and Rick Aduno, our assistant coach, is jumping up and down on this pad, and Vivey's hitting it with a goalie stick. And this goes on for 5 minutes. And then there's a knock at the door. It's clearly this guy coming back to measure my pads. So I sit back up in the chair. The guy comes in. He goes, hi, Jason. My name is so-and-so at the league office. This is Doug Shedden here. We're here to measure your pads. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. Please stick out your right pad. So I stick out my right pad that they've been jumping on for 5 minutes. And he pulls the tape measure out, and he goes, yep, 13.5. They're legal. He shows Doug Shedden. Doug goes, yep, they're good. Okay. So it's just kind of like a backstory to us winning that. And this guy who did it, and Rick knows him very well, and he had a very prominent career in hockey. And, you know, he knew it was kind of a BS move that they're making this call after game 3 and warm pads. And, you know, to me, that's something that I'll never forget, and that he handled it correctly.
I completely forgot about that.
That's a good story.
Forgot about that.
I want to get into some of your scouting, and you know, you end up with Washington, and you moved along after head coaching, and you've been there for 14 years now. Jason, walk the listeners through a day in the life of a scout from morning to bedtime, including traveling, the type of notes you take, filing reports, keeping up with what's going on around the league. Just one of your days, a life in the life of you.
Well, Mike, like we talked about, like information gathering is as important as the players. So that never stops. And you use every avenue you can, from different podcasts to XM radio to articles in different journals. Like you're forever studying the game. And the ones that do, I think, have the most information, obviously. But, you know, for a typical day, like, you know, living where I am now, I'll leave on a Wednesday. I'll fly into Boston. You know, I got the Bruins at 7 o'clock. I'll get in. I'll check into my hotel downtown Boston. Get showered up, maybe get a workout in, go down to the Garden, and then you start preparing. Like you go in there with the game plan. Like, you know, I know this guy's a free agent this year. This guy's up. You know, they're talking about him and trades, and you're gathering all that information from things you've read, and whether it's right or not, you got to be prepared for it. So you'll go in there. You'll get into the Garden. I like going into Boston. You know, they treat you well there. You'll go downstairs. You get your credential. They usually every time they put on a good meal for you. They kind of butter it up, and you're sitting down there and you're rubbing shoulders with the Johnny Busicks of the world and Jack Edwards and just guys that been around the game. So when I was young, it was neat. It was neat to be around them and just kind of be a fly on the wall and take it in. And, you know, you run into a Bobby Orr or whatever, and you just keep your mouth shut and try and take everything in. You know, you look over and there's Peter Mahovlich, you know. So those pro scouts, we I don't want to say we run together, but you know everyone on the team. So they are in for the other teams. You go up to the press box, and the irony behind the business is you're making $1 million decisions in the worst seats in the house, sitting up in the rafters. And but you'll sit up there. You get your computer. You get your game notes. You write down their lines. You have the guys circled you want to watch, and you watch them. And you know, you might circle 6 guys on from either team that you want to watch, whether they're playing Montreal or Dallas or whoever. And you're taking notes, but there's this little number 11 from Montreal that just keeps jumping out at you. And,
Yeah.
you didn't go in there to watch him, but every time he's on the ice, he's doing something that catches your eye. So when that's all done, you go back to your hotel and you start a report, and you put the lines in. You write about what you saw, and you can only be honest. You don't make stuff up. You write what you saw, good and bad. So when that's done, you get to bed, you get up the next morning, and you go to the next city and do it all over again. In the meantime, sometimes you got to drive, and it could be a weather thing if you're trying to get from Boston into Hartford or whatever, and horrible weather. Like, you got all these little things that it's not a glamorous. I mean, me personally, I love it, but it's not all flying first class and eating steak tips and shrimp on the plane. Like, it's hard work, and you're grinding it pretty hard. You're away from your family. When I got into this, my son was 1 year old, so it was that was really hard on my family, and obviously they have to be all bought in. So you're going to go Wednesday, then you're going to go Thursday in Hartford. Then you might do a doubleheader American League game between Bridgeport and the New York Islanders. Maybe a Sunday afternoon game in Springfield. And you just keep on going. And, the best part of the game is going to the games, watching the games, forming your own opinion. The computer work and putting reports in, it gets monotonous at times because there's only so many ways you can write about a player and how they skate and stuff. But it's a necessity. You're putting information into a database for the Washington Capitals that we can go back on and check in on. And so when we're looking at a Michael Kempney on trade deadline, we read everybody's reports. We might refresh with some video in the staff room, and it's all the little things which add up to the big thing. And the big thing is one day hopefully winning. So. It's
what about the analytics from that standpoint? Are you a believer in that?
Yeah, I am. It's definitely been a tool that has really morphed into like this pretty big deal here in the last 8-9 years, I think. And we have a really good analytics staff that some of the information they come up with. For me, it's a tool. Like, you need eyes, you need reports, you need information. And then you parlay it with the information that your analytics guys are giving you, and you come up with an educated guess on what you think this player is going to be. Now, I don't believe in just going off analytics, and I don't believe just going off the eye test. You work together as a team. And when Brian McClellan became our GM, he implemented a good analytics staff, which they're in on all our meetings, and they're part of it. And they're part of our team now, and they've been very helpful.
Well, I was going to say to you, the analytics may suggest some things, but nothing says it more than watching a guy chase a puck down in a corner with a monster barreling behind him, and how they both respond instinctively, especially if the smaller guy comes up with the puck, and how's the big guy going to respond, and vice versa.
That's right, Mike. And here's another thing, like, analytics, like, you watch how a guy reacts behind the play or on the bench, whether he's slamming sticks or giving his teammate or his coach an earful. There's no analytics that studies that. Like, you need eyes, and you need to be there. And I think the teams that have success, the teams that implement both sides of it, the scouts being on the ground, the foot soldiers, and the numbers guys, and those are the teams that are having success.
Well, it's good. Go ahead, Squid.
No, I didn't really think. I mean, I guess I've been out of the game for quite some time, but I didn't think analytics kind of applied to hockey as much as they would to baseball, so to speak. But I guess there are some numbers and some analytic things that when you put them together with the eye test, then all of a sudden it makes sense. But I didn't realize that analytics were that important in hockey. But I guess I was wrong.
Well,
which I'm not very often, but
I'm being very 100% transparent here. When it first became part of our office, I was all ears because every day I want to try and better myself, but I was skeptical, and and then they backed it up with their numbers and passed on to the eye test. and very quickly it grew on me. And nowadays, if you're going to rebel against it, you're gonna find yourself on the outside looking in, if you ask me, because the more information and the more tools you have, the better chance you have of making an accurate decision. So I am on board with analytics.
Well, let's just take it one step further. Mark Howell once told me, he was scouting for Detroit, I'm sure as you're aware at one point. He said that his theory in scouting was simple. If a guy has the puck a lot, that's a pretty good indicator right there. But I mean, he's talking tongue in cheek, obviously, but in simplified terms, is it any really more than that, depending on the position? And number two in this, Jason, is there one attribute that breaks the tie when it comes down to one or two players? You've already mentioned compete, I think, is one of your biggest things.
Yeah. Well, and compete and character, I guess, kind of go hand in hand. Usually the high character guys compete, but the skill set. I mean, if you're a smart player, that's gonna, you want smart players, and you don't always have to have the hardest shot or the fastest skater. And I'll use our guy Nick Backstrom as a classic example of that. His hockey IQ is through the charts, and his numbers speak for itself, and he's not going to blow the doors off someone and beat a defenseman wide and drive to the net. Very rarely he'll beat a goaltender when the goaltender can see it, but he's such a smart player and knows where to be. And if you're one step ahead of the game, you got a good advantage of having success.
I was going to ask you. Go ahead, Squid. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So you just re-signed your top goal scorer of all time for the Capitals. Do you think that Ovechkin has a chance to surpass Wayne Gretzky in goals?
Well, I'll tell you what I do know. If he does, that means I'll probably have some job security. So I'm really hoping he does. That means, Alex is, he's special. Like the numbers he's putting up at this age, and just the longevity of his career. He doesn't miss a lot of games, and he plays hard, and he's a big body. And we touched on it earlier, like these big guys, and I'm not saying Pat and Maroon, but these teams with big players, and I think Ovi's gonna be fine. I think he's got a shot at it. Like Ovi's. I don't know him personally. Like we've flown on charters together. You say hello, and that's about it. You see him at training camp, but from everything I've heard about him, he's just a big kid that loves playing hockey, and to me, that's half the battle. If you're playing the game and having fun doing it, you're going to go out there and have a lot of success. And I really hope for the Capitals' sake he gets there. It's going to be a fun story for the next 4 or 5 years, and see where he gets. But Father Time isn't on his side, but he's defied those odds so far. He's a freak of nature when it comes to working out, and he's passionate about the sport.
I want to expand on something you touched on a little bit. We're down to about our last 2 minutes here. I want to expand on something you touched on before, Jace, was when you're looking at a player and you're checking off all the boxes for what you're looking at. A certain player, if you're looking at him, there's certain attributes maybe he may have, or he plays well against a particular team. He doesn't play well against another team. Does the final evaluation, you're trying to look at that, almost come down to like a golf handicap where you throw out the good and bad games and sort of analyze the mean?
Well, it's hard to judge a player when you haven't seen him a lot. The more times you see him, the more familiar you're going to get with him.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this.
And like it's funny. You can watch a player, and you can see Ovi on a bad night. And if you don't know Ovi a lot, you're gonna be like, that guy makes a lot of money, and he didn't do really well that night. But you watch him over time, and he's gonna he's gonna get the job done. So yeah, it's back to the old analytics and the eye test, and put it all together, and you got to kind of project where these guys are going to be. And with us at deadline, going back on a question that Rick asked, like, you don't always need the best player, but you need the player that's the best fit for what you're looking for. Like, you look at Toronto, for example, right now, like losing Zach Hyman. He played an intricate role on that top line and doing the dirty work, getting people the puck. And, they bring in a guy like Michael Bunting, who people in Toronto don't know a lot about, but he's that type of player who's going to do that. So you've got to find guys that fit your team's need. And you know what? Player X may be a better player, but player Y is going to be a good fit here. And now that not only that, Mike, too, now you're balancing in, since the lockout, the salaries, and you got a tough job on cap. You got 81.5. If one guy wants $6 million, you think you can get a guy for $900,000. That maybe the drop off isn't that significant. It's a business decision too.
Squid, final comment?
No, I hope for our sake that Bunting does fill that role that Hyman has vacated, and our top line continues to produce the way they do, and our team wins a whole lot of games, and hopefully a Stanley Cup while we're still alive, Michael.
Well, that's all we can hope for. But the guy at the bottom screen there is going to make sure that it's going to make it very difficult to go through a certain city in America. So, Jace, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, man. We were great having you. Great stories. Best to you in your career moving forward. Not too much success when you come into Toronto, please. But
you know what? I play every game to win, whether it's where it is.
I knew you were going to say that for some reason.
Somebody asked me when Jared Bednar started coaching Colorado and I was scouting for Washington. Jared and I have a relationship, and I said I'm going to cheer for him all but the times we play against him. So I like Toronto, and I appreciate everything you guys do and getting the good word and support out there to your fan base. It's just been a pleasure to be on it here today, guys. Thank you so much.
Great having you, Jace. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Fitzy.
See you, Rick.